Being liked is the fastest way to become replaceable. Most people think clarity is dangerous, but what really destroys you is the silence that replaces your boundaries. Before psychology had a name, Machiavelli was already dissecting human behavior and exposing how approval addiction destroys authority. Nothing has changed since. Break the approval habit just in the next 20 minutes, and you'll never chase it again. The moment you start needing to be liked, you're no longer leading, you're adjusting. Following. Performing. Machiavelli saw this weakness firsthand. He watched rulers, popes, princes, generals, rot their own empires from within, all because they craved applause more than authority. And every time they reached for affection, they let go of power. Because being liked isn't free. It comes with invisible strings, tied to opinions, approval, and unspoken rules. And those strings? They don't just guide you, they bind you. You stop acting from instinct. You start bending toward the crowd instead of the crown. This is why real power never begs to be liked. It chases something harder to fake. Results, influence, control. Machiavelli wrote it cleanly, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose." And yet people still misread it as cruelty, as coldness. But what he meant was sharper. Love is fickle. Fear builds freedom. Because love demands things. Fear does not. The people who like you today will expect you to play their game tomorrow, to stay agreeable, to stay small, to keep them comfortable. And when you stop performing, they don't just walk away, they turn on you. Resentment replaces the praise they once gave freely. Any leader who's tried to please everyone learns this the hard way. Applause becomes obligation. Obligation becomes a trap. And those traps? They're lined with smiles, but they end in silence. Fear, by contrast, is clean. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't argue. It doesn't try to change you, because it knows it can't. That's what real power is, movement without permission. Because being liked is a contract. Every laugh, every compliment, is a subtle negotiation. And those negotiations can be revoked. That's why the powerful don't rely on them. Because needing to be liked turns every interaction into a vote. And votes can be lost. Machiavelli saw this happen in Florence. He saw leaders surrender their strategies in exchange for popularity. And he watched whole republics collapse under the weight of being well-liked. Because the more people like you, the more they think they own you. But the more they fear you, the more they let you own yourself. Look at the names history remembers, not just Machiavelli's peers, but icons across time. The disruptors. The visionaries. The ones who didn't ask permission to lead. Napoleon. Cleopatra. Genghis Khan. Elizabeth I. None of them waited to be liked. They moved with intention, decisive, polarizing, impossible to ignore. They didn't explain their ambition. They didn't dilute their voice to keep the peace. They understood a simple law. The more you adjust for approval, the more you disappear. And they had no interest in disappearing. Now zoom in. You're in a room, a boardroom, a dinner, a stage. You can say what keeps things smooth, or say what cuts through. One wins the smile. The other wins the room. Because sometimes, real control requires being unlikable. Not because you're cruel, but because you're honest. And in that moment, Machiavelli would whisper something most can't stomach. If you must harm, do it so your enemy can't retaliate. Not violence, psychology. Authority without apology. Precision without fear. Because when you move like that, calm, deliberate, indifferent, you no longer need to be liked. That's your first transformation. You stop chasing applause. You stop softening your tone. You stop managing people's comfort. And instead, you build the kind of presence that doesn't flinch, doesn't adjust, doesn't ask. And that shift? That's when people start treating you differently. Because now they know, you're not here for affection. You're here for control. You lose control the moment you start editing yourself to be liked. Your words get softer. Your decisions slower. Your ambition starts hiding behind a smile. And worst of all, you begin shrinking in rooms where you should be expanding. Machiavelli had a name for this slow decay. He called it death by 1,000 smiles. He saw rulers fall into this trap constantly, trying to win the love of both the nobles and the masses. And in the end, they pleased no one. They lost the respect of allies and the fear of enemies. All because they wanted applause. But here's the Machiavellian reversal. The powerful don't avoid being disliked, they design it. They choose their enemies as deliberately as their allies. They build friction on purpose. Because if no one resists you, it means you're not pushing hard enough. That's your second transformation. You stop softening your presence to stay liked, and start sharpening it to be felt. No more filtering your words. No more explaining your vision to people stuck in their own fear. No more surrendering your future just to avoid one uncomfortable moment today. You don't just stop apologizing for your strength, you let it speak for you. Because true power isn't about being surrounded by smiles. It's about commanding silence. The kind that settles when people sense you don't need permission to stand where you stand. And that's not theory. That's legacy. That's Machiavelli. He saw the trap long before modern psychology had a name for it. The desire to be liked isn't some harmless trait. It's weakness in disguise. It's the leash disguised as virtue. Society praises it. Schools train it. Families enforce it. But it's a system built to keep you tame. Machiavelli didn't write for the man who wanted to be good. He wrote for the one who wanted to win. And he knew that morality, when used against you, becomes a trap. A set of rules designed to paralyze the strong while the weak move without guilt. So far, you've seen how chasing applause weakens your posture, and how engineering resistance can actually sharpen your authority. But we're far from finished. Next, we'll strip away the biggest illusion of all, that being agreeable earns you safety, and show you how Machiavelli turned distance into dominance. So if you're still trying to be liked, what are you really doing? You're asking for emotional safety. Trading clarity for comfort. You're begging for approval when you should be declaring your next move. That's your third transformation. You stop seeking acceptance and start commanding space. No more performance. No more waiting for feedback to feel certain. Your actions no longer come with disclaimers. You move, they adjust. Because real power doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being undeniable. And that's why the truly powerful, the ones who reshape rooms, rewrite outcomes, and never flinch, aren't chasing your validation. They respect one currency only: control. And every moment they appear likable? That's not need. That's strategy. Let's go deeper. When you seek to be liked, you become predictable. People know you'll avoid confrontation. They know you'll bite your tongue, smile on cue, and smooth over conflict just to stay accepted. And that makes you manipulable. Because now all it takes to control you is the threat of rejection. Even worse, you become replaceable. Because if you act like everyone else, agreeable, humble, harmless, then why would anyone remember you? Machiavelli would never aim to be liked. He would aim to be remembered, admired from a distance. Not because he lacked empathy, but because he understood this timeless law. Familiarity breeds contempt, but distance breeds reverence. He would show charm strategically, smile with purpose, agree without surrender, every move calculated, every impression built for impact. And that's your fourth transformation. You stop trying to blend in and start mastering distance. Strategic distance. No more forced smiles. No more explaining yourself to stay in people's good graces. You don't serve their comfort anymore. You serve clarity. Because likability isn't safety. It's a trap. The more people like you, the more they expect from you. They demand consistency, softness, predictability. They want you to stay small, to stay quiet, to stay available, for their benefit. But Machiavelli didn't bend to expectation. He bent expectation to serve power. And he understood this. The moment someone controls how you're allowed to behave, even subtly, you're no longer free. You're already conquered. That's why the powerful don't chase affection. They chase leverage. They build structures of respect, not networks of need. Because here's the harsh truth. If you have to ask for loyalty, love, trust, it's not real. It's performance. And performance dies the second you stop entertaining. So what did Machiavelli teach instead? Build a presence that commands attention, without requesting it. Rooted not in softness but in sharpness. The kind that cuts through noise. That stands tall when others fold. That earns respect even in silence. In case this content challenged something in you, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Because power spreads through those who are ready for it. You've seen this before. The people the world can't stop watching, they're not the ones chasing likability. They're the ones who walk in unshaken, unfiltered, unapologetically themselves. Not because they're arrogant, but because they have one thing most don't. Emotional independence. And that's your fifth transformation. You stop depending on applause to validate your path. You don't need agreement to act. You don't need praise to trust your instincts. Because the man who can stand alone in judgment, without begging for approval, is the man others will eventually follow. Yes, you'll be misunderstood. Yes, they'll call you cold, arrogant. But that's not reality, that's their insecurity reacting to your strength. Because deep down, people don't trust those who try to please everyone. They respect the one who doesn't flinch, who doesn't adjust, who doesn't need to be liked. Because if you need everyone, you'll betray anyone to keep them. But if you need no one, then you become the one thing they cannot control. And that's the beginning of true power. Let's get to the root. The people who shape history, who bend culture, who survive storms and betrayal, they don't rise because they're adored. They rise because they're respected for their clarity, feared for their precision, and impossible to bend. Approval might win applause. But it's fear, earned through unwavering presence, that earns endurance. And the moment you let go of the need to be liked, you stop performing. You stop diluting. You stop shrinking just to keep others comfortable. Instead, you begin to move like the outcome already belongs to you. That's your sixth transformation. You drop the need for acceptance and replace it with undeniable presence. You stop attracting the needy. You start commanding the strong. You stop negotiating your identity and start defining the atmosphere just by entering the room. That's the transformation Machiavelli designed in every line of The Prince. He wasn't trying to make you kind. He was training you to be unbreakable. And if you want to push that further, to build this kind of presence without turning cold or cruel, watch A Power Trick, How to Be Unbreakable Without Losing Your Humanity. The link is on the screen and in the description section. Now here's the final illusion, the one that keeps most men powerless and wondering why their goodness never protected them, the belief that being liked earns respect. Machiavelli dismantled that lie centuries ago. He watched good rulers, merciful, gentle, beloved, get betrayed by their own courts and eaten alive by the very people they tried to protect. Not because they were too nice, but because they thought niceness was security. It wasn't. It was exposure. Because the moment people believe they can influence you, your tone, your message, your presence, you're no longer a threat. You're a servant to their expectations. You're manageable. And Machiavelli's answer was brutal in its clarity. If you want to hold power, respect must come first. And if being disliked is the price, you pay it. Ask yourself, who really wins in the long run? The one who smiles through disrespect hoping to win hearts, or the one who walks away the second the room forgets his worth? One gets attention. The other gets obedience. One fades. The other becomes legend. Because power doesn't live in harmony. It climbs through hierarchy. And you cannot rise if you're chasing applause from people beneath your purpose. If they like you for being sweet, they'll replace you with someone sweeter. But if they respect you for your sharpness, they'll guard what they fear losing. Want to become irreplaceable? Then kill the need to be liked. And become necessary. Machiavelli's rulers didn't measure people by loyalty or charm, only by leverage. Every relationship served a purpose. Does this person bring me closer to power? Do they hold influence I lack? Do they protect my position, or threaten it? If the answer was no, the connection was cut. No drama. No emotion. Just strategy. Because only the powerless can afford to be sentimental. And maybe you're not sitting on a throne, not a prince, not a founder, not a general. But your life still has a hierarchy, your friend group, your workplace, your online presence. Power doesn't require a palace, it just requires perspective. Those who rise don't adapt to opinion. They shape it. Picture this. You walk into a room and everyone smiles, everyone approves. Feels good, right? But Machiavelli would ask, what did that approval cost you? Did you stay silent when you should have spoken up? Did you sugarcoat a truth? Did you stroke someone's ego just to keep things smooth? Did you perform likability instead of standing your ground? Every one of those decisions may gain you favor, but they drain your force. You're becoming predictable. You're becoming easy to read, easy to replace. And Machiavelli never wrote for men like that. He wrote for those who shape the environment instead of adapting to it. And here's another tactical shift he mastered. Fear isn't about cruelty. It's about composure. It's the way people hesitate around you, not because you're harsh, but because they know you won't fold under pressure. Your calm becomes your command. Your presence speaks before you open your mouth. But when you're addicted to approval, your actions become a mirror. You wait to see how others react before you move. You ask, will this offend them? Instead of, will this work? That's the reverse of power. That's performance. The real player leads, and everyone else adjusts. That's your seventh transformation. Stop trying to be understood. Start being undeniable. You stop smoothing your edges for comfort. You start sharpening them for impact. You let people misjudge you. Call you too intense. Too clear. Too ambitious. Let them. Because confusion creates chatter, and fear creates distance. If you want loyalty, let people admire your decisiveness. If you want impact, speak like you don't need permission. If you want influence, stop chasing attention. Start becoming impossible to ignore. Because in the real game of power, the most dangerous man isn't the one who draws applause. It's the one who doesn't crave it. And here's the trap. The need to be liked doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like safety, like progress, like approval. You enter rooms, people smile, they laugh at your jokes, they nod when you speak. You think you're winning. But what you're building isn't power, it's dependence. A golden cage made of validation. And by the time you realize it's locked, your strength is already gone. You start to believe you're doing something right. But Machiavelli would stare through you and say, you're not building strength, you're building dependence. Because when the applause dies, when your smile no longer buys you favor, they'll discard you like you never mattered. You think you're navigating the game, but they see someone predictable, someone manageable. And the moment you stop being manageable, they turn. That's why his harshest truth still cuts the deepest. Trying to be liked means surrendering control. It means living by someone else's terms. And that makes you easy to break. History is full of men with good reputations and no power. Men too afraid to offend, too desperate to be accepted, too loyal to being seen as good. They avoided hard decisions, necessary risks, and uncomfortable truths. They died respected and irrelevant. Machiavelli moved differently. He didn't chase likability, he built presence. One so sharp, so stable, so unapologetically direct, that people had no choice but to adjust to him. They might not have liked him, but they never overlooked him. And that's stronger than love. Because love is emotional, it fades. But fear? Fear leaves a permanent mark. People still misunderstand his line, it is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. They think it's about cruelty. It's not. It's about durability. Love is a choice, and choices can be reversed. But when people fear losing your respect, fear stepping out of line, fear being shut out, they self-correct. They lower their voice around your silence. They treat your attention like currency. And your boundaries become law. That's the invisible structure Machiavelli built, not through charm, but through certainty. Certainty in his own voice. Certainty in his direction. Certainty that approval was never the price of obedience. And here's what most people don't want to admit. The more likable you are, the easier you are to replace. There will always be someone more agreeable, more entertaining, more humble, more polished. But no one can copy what you build when you stop performing and start commanding. When you walk into a room and don't ask for space, you own it. They can imitate your tone or your look, but they can't fake your detachment. They can't replicate the kind of confidence that comes from not needing anything from them. That's what Machiavelli mastered, and that marks your eighth transformation. You stop relying on likability as a crutch. You start using it as a blade. If you smile, it's to gain position. If you yield, it's to tighten your hold. If you compliment, it's because it serves a move. But the moment someone thinks they can buy your approval, you disappear. No drama. No explanation. Because power doesn't negotiate. It exits, and lets absence do the talking. And when you withdraw from those who depended on your constant validation, their reaction exposes the truth. They never respected you, they expected you. And the moment you stopped performing, they showed you what they really were. Entitled to the version of you that asked to be liked. So why does this matter? Because in a world obsessed with being liked, being untouchable is rebellion. And Machiavelli didn't write for the obedient. He wrote for the ones ready to step off the stage and seize the throne. Every word you've heard until now was a mirror, showing you how you shrink for applause, how you bend for peace, how you trade your voice for belonging. But that ends here. Because the moment you stop performing, you start positioning. The moment you stop chasing validation, you start commanding space. And the moment you stop asking to be liked, you start building a presence so grounded, so still, that people orbit you without knowing why. That's the final move. The real power play. Not fear through force. Not love through flattery. But reverence through indifference. Not because you demand it, but because you no longer need anything. And when that shift happens, the entire dynamic flips. They chase. You choose. You decide. They wonder where they stand, because you've already taken your place. That is why Machiavelli still matters. Because centuries later, in a louder world than he could have imagined, his silence still dominates the room. And if you remember nothing else from this, remember this. You will never be feared if you're afraid to be disliked. You will never be followed if you're addicted to being accepted. And you will never lead until you stop performing. This wasn't a lesson in cruelty. This was a reminder of what you were before you forgot your edge. Now walk out there. Don't explain. Don't soften. Don't ask. Just take your place. And make them feel your absence before they even deserve your presence. This episode is part of an ongoing series on Machiavellian psychology, power, and strategy in modern life. I've gathered all the key insights from Machiavelli into one playlist. The link is on screen now and in the description below. Watch it, revisit it, and use it like a weapon. And now I want to hear from you. Which idea in this episode hit the hardest? Drop it in the comments. No fluff, no filters. Just power. Because here, we're not chasing applause. We're building minds that don't flinch.